Hello, I'm Eats Everything. I'm here with Music Radar, and we're going to talk about my album and loads of other nonsense. We're going to have a lovely time doing it. How did it start for me? I guess I started listening to like hardcore and jungle. Well, it wasn't even jungle then. I guess it was jungle techno probably in like 1992, 1991, 1992. I was young, and I had I didn't have an older brother, but I had loads of mates who had older brothers who were into raving. So they would basically we'd go out up to the playing field, and they'd all be in their cars playing like Easy Groove or Top Buzz or Andy C or whoever, like from back in the day. And my mate's older brother had a set of 1210s, and because I used to play the drums when I was a kid, I went round his house and he was like, "Oh, have a go on the decks." And I had a go and I could mix straight away. And so that was then, I was 12 years old and I was like, fuck, right, mum, I want to get some of these. I was hooked from that moment on. So my mum got me a pair of JB Systems Disco 2000s and a Cam Made to Fave 25 mixer for that Christmas 92, 93. And that's where it began. That's where my love affair started. And then in about 1999, I think, I was at a place called Sakoshi. It was like a little Japanese bar next to Bristol Academy that my friend owned. And I used to DJ there a bit. And a friend of mine was a hairdresser, and she had a client called Masataki, a Japanese guy called Masataki Toyota. Hello, Masa. Who, he was a producer, but he was looking for a DJ to come and help him with ideas and stuff like that. And I'd been wanting to get into music production for a while. And we met and we got on like a house on fire, and I just started going around his house, and he had Pro Tools and he had a big mixer and he had a couple of Roland Simps and stuff. And we just started fucking about. And I just started learning from him basically. And that's how I got into it. The idea behind the album was basically, as I said, I've been into rave music since an early age, and I've been into all the genres and all the, everything over the years, be it house, techno, drum and bass, jungle. And, when I was younger, my mum used to play like soul and boogie and disco and stuff like that. Nothing like too avant-garde, Ashford and Simpson, that kind of thing. So I was all, that was the kind of funk-based music. My dad was into like ZZ Top and Queen and stuff, which I love Queen. And so I've been into and introduced to all styles of music throughout my, my life basically. And I just wanted to do an album where it was a sort of trip down memory lane with a contemporary edge. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on all the genres that I love. And I had to enlist the help of some people along the way, like the drum and bass tune with Unglued. I got this wicked idea down, but the drum and bass bit, because it starts off like halftime, like funk. An amazing instrumentalist called Nigel Whippinson Fleming, big up yourself. He came in and did a lot of the musicality here is played by him. He'll just play it on a Rhodes or on a piano, and then I'll just take all the parts and the data, he calls it, and turn it into music. And he's an amazing bass player, amazing guitar player. So he played this wicked bass riff on the bass guitar, and I'd had this like halftime funk thing. And then when I dropped into the jungle, it was cool jungle, but it wasn't hitting right. It just wasn't hitting quite right. And I was going to do it with Die and Dismantle, but timings just didn't work. So I hit up Unglued, who's an amazing drum and bass producer, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm up for it." So I sent him what I'd done, and he just sort of crafted it and made it into this modern sounding drum and bass record. So it was just about hitting on all the genres. I've got boogie on there, I've got house, I've got garage, I've got two-step, I've got hardcore, I've got like drum and bass jungle, some like gospel-y soul funk type thing. And I just wanted to make sure I touched on everything I love and put it all in one record. And it's really eclectic, but it's all got a nod to the dance floor. The people I collaborated with, so on the opening track, it's with Shermanology, who the version on the album is totally different to the single that came out a couple of years ago. And Shermanology, a brother and sister duo from Holland, she's a vocalist and he's also a vocalist as well, but he's a wicked producer. And I'd done this tune with that sampled a vocal, but I needed a new vocal, so I sent to them, and they they got a choir in and they went to town on it, and it's amazing. So I knew them and I was a big fan of them. We didn't actually ever get in the studio together. They did it in Holland, sent me the bits, and then I did it in the UK with a guy called Mark Ralph. Then Goldie track was me on my own and just Goldie over the internet. Then the next one is Gardner, who's a Bristol boy, good mate of mine, wicked MC. I'd made a house tune, sent it to him. We got in the studio up in London together, laid out the vocal. And yeah, the other collaborators like Kerry Chandler, again, that was just a voice note. And he hasn't featured vocally on, he's only ever featured vocally on a track 3 times, and he hasn't for 20 years. And I just hit him up in lockdown, similar to how I did with Goldie, and said, dude, would you be up for featuring on this album I'm doing? I'm up for, I want some like poignant house music type quotes, and your voice is amazing. And he was like, yeah, man, no worries. And then literally after he'd done it, he just sent me a load of voice notes, literally fucking 30 or 40, house music is the way, and all this kind of stuff. Fucking cool. But a bit dodgy quality. And I kept asking, again, like with Goldie, I kept asking him to re-record it. And he's like, hey man, I don't need to re-record it, just send me it. So I sent him the stuff and he sent it back, and it was like he basically recorded it on the best microphone through the best preamp ever. And it wasn't, it was just the voice notes, and he's that much of a wizard. Who else is there? Most of the collaborators, a lot of them, when it's vocals, we got in the studio together. MJ Cole, again, I'd made a tune and it wasn't quite hitting right. It was garage, but I'd made it more housey. And I hit him up and he was up for it. And then we got in the studio together and we smashed it out. Yeah, it's some of it. I'd like to have been more in the studio with people, but as it started in lockdown, you know, we couldn't always get together. The reason I decided to sack off the hardware and compressors and pedals and synths and all that stuff is because when in lockdown, as I said earlier in the video, I took my stuff. I took just the bare minimum home. And I found that my productivity just went through the roof when I was just using the in the box stuff. And I found that I would just noodle. When I had all the synths and stuff, I'd sit there for hours just with drum machines fucking about and like tweaking the 303 and trying to program the 303 and like, you know, doing all the different, just basically programming it from scratch. And it would take me hours and hours and hours of fannying around. And then I would have bits of tunes finished and never actually finish anything. So in the end, I was just like, do you know what? I'm finishing music this way. So this is obviously the way I'm meant to make music. I love all this gear. It's so exciting every time you get a new synth and working it out and learning how to play it. And I've made some amazing noises on some of those things, but I think you can do almost as much as you can in the box, and my productivity is way higher. So for me, it was a no-brainer. In the end, I wasn't even turning half of them on. So I just thought, why the fuck are they there? They look nice, but what am I doing? So got rid of them, and now I just smash it out on there. So I guess my approach has changed. I listened to some of my old tunes, and I'm like, how the fuck was I doing that? And they were definitely a little more free and quirky, and I guess because I mean, I don't know what I'm doing now, but I know less what I'm doing, knew way less what I was doing. I was in a box room with 2 fucking massive Mackie HR 824, whatever they're called, right in your face. And I was just basically making it up as I went along. And with Entrance Song, for example, like the bass line was on my first sort of big record. The bass line was a big 808 sub-tom. And then the kick drum was a 909, but with a fucking massive tail. And the two shouldn't work together. And I don't even think they're in key. Everything I do, I make sure the kick is in key with the root key of the bass. And I make sure everything's the perfect relationship and they're singing to each other. But back then I didn't. And it didn't seem to matter because my tracks sounded big in the club and they were working out really well for me. So I guess my approach has become more about the sonics and a little less about the quirky elements to the music, which, I don't know, I kind of wish I was a bit more gung-ho. It's great to be able to make music sound better, but I think sometimes those little quirky elements are what made it what it was. So it's a catch-22. I can't play fuck all. When I'm playing like the chord in the the chord in the We Lost Ourselves and Found a Family tune, the title track, the hardcore ravey sort of chord, that was just trial and error. Right, oh, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Just playing chords until I got it. I don't know anything about music theory. I don't know. I believe I know how to make a banger, and I know how to make tracks sound good through trial and error and learning over. I've been making music for 23 years now. It must be not, yeah, not, no, 26 years I've been making music. But it's all trial and error. It's all self-taught. There's no one's really shown me anything. Massa, the guy I talked about earlier, he showed me a little bit, but not like, you know, it was, we were learning together. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think, I wish I knew music theory. I wish when I decided to play the drums when I was a kid, I decided to play the piano. I wish more than anything that was what I did, but I didn't, and I've learned how to get by. I don't mean to be arrogant and sound like a twat, but my drums are wicked. I've got a lot of time for my drums. I really spend a lot of time on my drums, and I guess that swing and groove that I have in my drums comes from the sort of rhythm within me that probably playing drums brought out of me. I can still, you know, knock out a little beat sometimes when I'm in the studio. I'll go in a free studio and just have a little bash around. I only learned for like a year and a half, but it just gives you enough to get that internal rhythm going, I guess. My DJ setup now, I used to, and this is no offense to Pioneer whatsoever, but my favorite period of my DJ career was when I used to use the Allen and Heath Zone 92 and the Roland Demora pedal on one send on return, and then the Boss RV6 reverb pedal on the other, and then 4 CDJs. And now I play with 4 CDJ 3000s and a Pioneer V10 mixer, which is an amazing mixer. Sounds great. It's got the effects, the normal Pioneer effects on the right-hand side are, you know, what they always have had, but they're obviously more advanced. And then on the left, they've got like a much more send and return, if you were using pedals kind of effects built-in unit there, which is the only thing I use. I don't use the normal Pioneer effects, but it's still not quite as malleable as having the standalone pedal, the standalone delay and standalone reverb, because that Roland Demora pedal, I used to have it in the studio as well. It's an unbelievable delay, and when you get to full feedback, it would never, you know, when some delays go out of control, they just go and they get more and more and more and more. The Demora would have this cutoff where even when you were full feedback, it would never go crazy. So you could do loads of stuff with it while it's fully fed back. So that was my favorite period. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's changed big time. I used to started on 1210s and started on JB Systems Disco 2000s. But yeah, then 1210s were the norm. And I do miss playing vinyl. And I've got a Tony DeVitt's record box here, which I bought, which I am going to start doing some sets with in the very near future. Yeah, so I do miss the vinyl days, but also it's fucking heavy, and it sounds great, but compared to what, you know, modern digital music now, there's no comparison really. My style hasn't really changed. I'm quite technical, and I do a lot of tricks, and I always have at least 2 tracks mixing the entire time. So I'll be, you know, one track I'll be playing, and then I'll be mixing the other in, and then I'll leave the track I've just mixed out looping generally, and then I'll be bringing in a 3rd track, and then I have a 4th deck for effects and drum rolls and stuff like that. So, you know, so you can bring stuff in, and the technology is amazing for that. And it's really good. But the way I DJ, I still DJ like a hardcore DJ, cutting and bringing stuff in and like chops, and that's how I've always DJed. That's how I learn, and that's how I still DJ to this day. I don't think the production influences the DJ side that much, because I'm just making tunes. But I think the DJ side has influenced how I produce, because my tunes have a lot of the time will have lots of little intricate little stoppages where they shouldn't be, and cuts and little things that happen that, you know, some tunes don't have, like, and I think that's sort of my sort of ADHD brain going, I need something weird to happen here. Do you know what I mean? So I think, and that comes from, I'm quite an agitated DJ, so I will, you know, I can't wait to get the next record in, even if I don't mix it, even if I don't, you know, I'll let the tune play, but I want to start bringing in the next one so people know what's coming. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, edits is something I do absolutely boatloads of. If I go to Recordbox down here, which is conveniently open, and then if I put, if I type rebeef, which is what I call, there's 3,754 edits, which is, I would say, quite a fair amount of edits. So it's what I'd spend a lot of my time doing, either removing drums, adding drums, taking breaks away. With old vinyl records and stuff, often they don't sound great, so I'll put them, rip them, and then put them into Ableton, and then put that iron pusher, and then add extra drum, because a lot of time the clap will be really quiet and stuff. So yeah, it's something and it makes my DJ sets, gives them, and I have like set drums that I use in each of them. So I've probably got 5 or 6 different little drum loops that I've made that I'll use. So it kind of like, it's succinct, and it also, so my sets have a constant rhythm to them. The one thing I've learned, and I've said this from the beginning, I'll say it now, is spend as much money as you can on the best monitor speakers you can afford. For me, when I went from having shitty little Rocket speakers to Mackie HR824 monitors, is when I started being able to really make the music I wanted to make, because you can hear the depth in the bass and stuff. Because I was making tunes on those Rocket speakers and I just couldn't get them to sound the way I wanted. And with the bigger, better speakers, I got a tax rebate, spent all my money on that 850 quid, and my music went up a level. So for me, it's about having the best speakers you can afford, and don't give up. Just keep going, keep going, keep going.